Yes. So UN report just came out. Venezuela death squads are killing young men and stage scenes. What's going on here?
So as we know, there's still a lot of issues regarding who is the legitimate president of Venezuela still. That still hasn't been fully resolved. The United States still does not believe that Maduro, who has taken power in Venezuela and is leading as their effective president, is the legitimate president. Due to issues related to like how the election was conducted and things of those nature. And there's been a lot of protests now, against the Maduro regime now. But
Always has been, but
yeah, but
it's
what's
getting
different
worse and
now,
worse.
it's becoming much more violent. And I'm surprised I'm not seeing a lot of the cable news outlets talk about this at all. The death toll numbers now are in the thousands, and it's not even justified. It's not like people starting a coup, but the Maduro regime is trying to make it seem that way in order to have that justification for these
Kind of like the
extrajudicial
political
killings.
backing, yeah. So they want international support. Maduro is basically one of those classic dictators. The only way he's holding on to the power that he has is because he's trying to find legitimate justifications for his actions, for national security, for the strengthening of the government, for the kind of coup that is happening to him that is illegitimate. He's using those kind of tactics to kind of justify and shore up his political base at home and also abroad. However, this is not really being that effective because the U.S. Western media is pretty much starting to turn on Maduro. And it seems that he recognizes his days are numbered, so he's going out in full force. He's getting these squads together he's kind of branch off of his military force. What are these death squads?
So yeah, they're actually not. This actually a specific fraction of their government. It's known as the FAES. So it stands for Venezuela. I don't know what the translation is, but it's a Venezuelan Special Action Forces, and they're just going up there, taking all their belongings, framing it as if like they were part of like a criminal gang or a coup, placing drugs and trying to
they would go to protesters
their families,
and so basically they would go to protesters and just like we see in those cop movies where they would throw the bag of cocaine in the trunk and be like, oh, you're a drug dealer, you're possessing drugs. Like they're using that, like it's a very
the case,
they're like threading this line of violence where we have justification to harm these individuals. However, the real goal to harm these individuals is because of political reasons and political violence rather than actual violence.
Yeah, and the families of victims are referring to them as death squads, hence the title of this Al Jazeera article that we're reviewing with you guys. And in terms of the actual numbers, since the Maduro regime came into office, since last year, 5,287 people have been arrested, and more than 1,500 people have been killed by these death squads. So this is an actual issue. It's still happening. The media isn't talking about it. It was a story in the news a lot for I think about 2 months ago, but it's kind of died off. But at that time there wasn't that much violence, and I think it's time the media actually brings it up again because of this, these violations of UN law and charters that are happening now. Because obviously the deaths and even just the regime in itself is atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, look, Lamar and I kind of fall on the side of we don't support Maduro, but I don't think we support Guaido in itself. So let me start speaking for myself before Lamar gets mad at me. Basically, the Venezuelan issue only gets resolved. I want it to be resolved in this way, basically, where Venezuela needs to self-determine. I think the United States needs to get out of the business of trying to inject its own favorability and leadership. So the Guaido dude, not the Guaido dude, his name is actually Guaido, President Guaido. He wants to become a legitimate president by ousting Maduro. Maduro, so far as we can see by Venezuela constitutional laws, he is the legitimate president, Maduro, right now. But Guaido believes that it's in his country's best interest that if Maduro was out. Now, if the Venezuela people were allowed to decide that, that might not end up in Guaido's favor. So that's why he's made appeals to Western media, Western countries like Canada, like United States for their support, and the European Union as well. And this Guaido is like a kind of a centrist, leftist, moderate, and he's not as favorable of the legacy left by Hugo Chavez.
Yeah, that's correct. I think Maduro wasn't he like the vice president of Hugo Chavez?
Yeah, he was like working under the Chavez administration and kind of took over on that fact. And basically what I want to say on this is that I think the Venezuelan people should be able to decide, and I don't think we need the endorsements of Western civilization and Western, not Western civilization, but like Western countries. And basically what it's doing, it just makes America kind of look imperialist in a sense, where they're just like in Chile, just like in Argentina, and other areas within South America. We're kind of trying to force our influence there, put our own people in there, and it smells of that altogether. And that's something I don't
I
want.
100% agree. There should be no military intervention whatsoever by the United States in this situation.
And our president and the Maduro and Trump trading threats, that's bad. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, 100%. There has been some key words that have been going around, such as, providing aid. But I always find that a bit of an issue when people just say aid versus, saying specifically like aid to help like victims.
Yeah.
Because usually when they say aid, they're also potentially implying that they're delivering weapons for like, a potential coup to use, which is basically like, a form of military intervention itself, except you're using a coup through proxy. So we need to be careful of the language that's being used by politicians in this case, because that's also not a solution to have like a proxy war that's being done on behalf of the United States.
Yeah, and the reason why people should care about Venezuela is because, one, they have a large amount of naturally occurring, not naturally occurring, I mean, all oil is naturally occurring, but like they have a large, deposit of oil on their country where almost citizens can go grab oil by themselves. Isn't it kind of free to citizens and then just cross over to Colombia and just sell it,
Yeah, I think it's essentially free, but maybe a couple cents on the gallon. But yeah,
Yeah, it's very cheap for oil in Venezuela, but I guess now, like, since the move to try and,
or actually, I'm sorry, I think that's also been part of the protest. Since the Maduro regime, it's not free anymore.
yeah.
So that might be an issue. I have to double check on that. Don't take my word on that, but I think that's part of the reason people are upset.
Yeah, and Venezuela, not just for its oil, but like the humanitarian crisis that's happening over there. And I think it's just not made better because when you have this outside support by the United States for one guy who's unfortunately by Venezuelan law isn't the president, President Guaido, and you have a Venezuelan law legitimate president but is not supported by the Venezuelan constitution, you get this kind of can of worms. And like, for example, if Trump makes friends on the international stage and Trump loses the next election, but the Latin American, or I guess Venezuela or some other country, supports Trump and be like, Trump's the real president, like, do you think that would be tolerated in our country? Like, who the hell are we to tell somebody how to determine their democracy or lack thereof? And then also, who the hell are the Russians to tell us how to run our democracy? And they try to hack and manipulate and stuff like that.
Trust me, we got a lot of issues with our democracy. We got the gerrymandering issues,
electoral college,
super PAC issues, the issue of dark money influencing our elections. Those are all things.
So yeah, and it's more of like, pot calling the kettle black. Like, it's just, Venezuela is something that we should stay the hell out of, because they're not like a downtrodden Middle Eastern country that we were responsible for. Venezuela is a country that has a diverse group of people and also diverse way to make money. It's just they need to tap into that, and the only way to do it is with the right leader, and they need to decide that for themselves.